So now what we want to do is just go in the outliner, just make sure we're staying organized still. I'm going to grab all my texture placement things, even the cameras that I have there, and group those and call those texture placements. Okay, and I can put those on a layer and hide them. Oh, I already have something called texture placement, so I can't call it the same thing. Let's hide that. Good. Okay, so now let's get, there's our light. We can leave the light here. That's our main light. Our main light's shining from this side. Okay, so if we were to jump over to this other side, again, it would be dark. So we have to kind of figure out our camera move that's inside here. Obviously, this isn't, anything we want to turn around and see the back of this. I think on this one, we want to just kind of come in like this and turn a little bit. Okay, just so we can see some of the detail. You could even create some, crazier camera angles, kind of come up like this, and then kind of showing each one of these pieces at a different angle. So I'll set up a couple cameras and we can play with it. So I'm going to go 120 frames. I'm going to make a new camera, panels perspective new, camera render, or render cam, whatever you want to call it. Click on the blue circle. And I like this to kind of fit, because my screen's a little bit shorter, it's not fitting, so I'm going to go to view, camera settings, vertical, there we go, and now this fits within here so I can see exactly what's going to render out. Okay, I'm going to take my focal length down to 20. It gives me a little bit more perspective on this. Maybe not 20. Let's go the other way. I'm going to go 60 and keep it a little bit flatter. Okay, so something like that might be kind of cool as we're like zooming in. So I'm going to go back to frame 1. I have my camera selected. I'm going to hit S to set a key. I'm going to go up to 120. Set a key there. Okay, we'll just see how that looks. Click and drag. Okay, not really liking how much black space is up there. So I'm going to go in the middle here. Just kind of pull this in to frame a little bit better. And then hit S to set another key. Okay, so there's one possible camera solution I could have for this. I could even, let's say I set this to 35 or 20. Okay, I set the focal length at 20. I'm back here, I hit S to set my key. I'm going to set a key on the focal length too. So I just right clicked and set a key. Then I go up to 60. Reset this to 35. Key it. Go up to 120. Set this to 60. And set another key. Okay. So now we're kind of getting that motion in there, which I don't think I like at all. I think the focal length thing just didn't work out. Let me just delete that. Right click, delete selected, keyframes are gone. We'll go back to 60. Let's see what we have here. Yeah, it looks like the stick shift is my focal point, and I don't want that to happen. I'd rather start here, or let's say start zoomed up on this, kind of like that. I'm going to delete all the keys. I can just shift double click in here, right click and delete selected. Okay, go back to frame 1. Go in there. It's good to play with different kind of camera angles because you get different renderings obviously. So I'm going to start here at 1, go to 120. Yeah, it's going to be hard to get everything into the scene. and set a key there. Let's go back to 1. So that could work, doing something like that. Okay. I'm going to make a new camera. I'll call this camera render 2. I'll take our focal length down to 20. And we can do something Star Warsy. So set a key here at 1. I'll go up to 120. Oops. Click the blue circle so we can see it. Click the camera settings vertical. And set a key there at 120. Let me reset this first key. So we can also do something like this. We can actually do several camera moves and kind of combine them together. Okay. And I'll do one more camera move in here. Which is the original one I said, which is just kind of starting off at one side, then going to the other. So resolution gate, camera settings, vertical. Let's change this to 50. Okay, I'm going to set a key here, go to 120. Set a key there, be zoomed in a little bit. Okay. And I don't like how it always does that weird wobbly thing, so I'm just going to recenter this and set a key in the middle. Okay, and I'm also going to zoom out a touch at 60. Oh, so close. Zoom in a little bit more. All right, let's see what that looks like. All right, that looks good. Okay, so I'm saving my scene. And then now we can get rid of all those holes. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to my regular perspective view. I'm going to take these cameras, right click on their visibility and delete the keyframe from it. Then I can turn the visibility off and hide them. Then I'm going to grab all the stuff that's inside here. So in order to do that, I have to unreference all the other stuff. Okay, so I'm marqueing it. Let me save before I do any of that. And under Window, Relationship Rendering Editors, Mental Ray, there's a thing called an Approximation Editor. So inside here, I have this guy. I'm going to delete it. Okay. And if I render this stuff out right now, we'll most likely see a bunch of holes. Surprisingly, it's not done yet, but I don't see too many holes. There's a big hole right here, and there's some other stuff going on. Okay. So this is where we need to set those things up so that we don't get any holes inside of our surface. So I'm going to come in here to the approximation editor. I'm going to make sure that I have all my objects selected, not my light, but all my objects selected. And I'm going to go to the surface area and say create a new approximation. Okay. And then I can go to edit. And this is going to give me the approximation settings. Okay, let me go back to that. Just checking something. Edit. Okay, and in here, this is where we set up our stuff for how these are going to render. So if I go in and just do a snapshot, go to an area I know I'm going to get some holes in, most likely down here stuff. Okay, there's a lot of detail down there. Alright, so I made it worse just to kind of illustrate the point a little bit better. But you can see on some of these where we have openings where the holes, the fillets are not really lining up right, the trims are not really working. There's blockiness here, there's a hole down here, some slicing. There's some stuff happening up here. Obviously, it's not what we want it to be. Okay, so the approximation editor right here is where we edit that. Okay, so again, window rendering editor, mental ray approximation editor. We can click on one we've already created for surfaces and hit edit. Now, surfaces are just regular surfaces. Okay, the trim curve are the ones that we've actually like trimmed out. So our fillets are actual surfaces. Okay, if I click on a fillet here, and I right click, you see there's no trim edge option. If I right click on this piece, there's a trim edge option. So there's two areas that we're adjusting here. We're adjusting surface and trim curve. So under edit for this, I'm just going to take this up to pixel length high quality. Okay. Then I'm going to grab all this stuff again. And I'm going to go to trim curve, create. There's a new one. And then in here, I can play with different settings. And we're going to try getting away with just doing the default, just 2 with this. And we'll see if we can get away with that. And if we can't, then we'll play with it even more. But let's see. Okay. So again, we save, and then we render, and then we see what happens. Okay, so I rendered it out. And I'm looking at, I look at the alpha channel here, and I can see there's a little bit of stuff popping in here, a little bit of stuff popping in here, a little bit of stuff popping in here. Okay, the alpha channel is my transparency, and so it's basically showing me where I can see through the object. Okay, so that means I need to turn my settings up. So I'm going to go to length, distance, angle on this, and if I take my maximum subdivisions up, that will help it. With these at 0, it just kind of assumes what it feels it should have. If you pump in a value, if I put the value to 1, that's actually like a low setting. Okay, the lower this number is, the better it is. And if I go to here and I type in mental ray approximation editor, you can actually get a guide for, here is the settings right there. Here's what all of these things are going to do. And if we find in here where it says length, distance, angle, specifies curvature, length, subdivides the surface or a curve so that no edge or length, and so on. For tree and grid, it's that. Okay. And I may actually have that backwards. It looks like that. So we'll see. We'll render this out again, and we'll see if that's going to help clean it up. And it may be part of the trim surface is not laying out correctly. Maybe part of the actual surfaces that are, like the fillets, maybe just not tessellated enough. And the whole process of tessellation is converting it from a NURB surface into a polygon surface. So let's look at this again. Nope, I still have some stuff. And looking at where it's happening. Right here it's happening because that's where we have our opening for that. So I just need to put something back there. But the other spots that it's happening, right here, there's a fillet or a fillet. And then right at the edges of our AC. Okay, so with this guy here, I'm just going to grab this plane, duplicate it, and make it bigger just so we don't have anything sticking out back there. Okay, so that'll take care of that a little bit. So I'm going to go into my mental ray approximation editor, go to edit, change this to tree, and no, here it is. There it is. So right here, this length right there says it's going to subdivide it until no triangles are bigger than 0.5. So I want to subdivide this until no triangles are bigger than 0.1. Now it'll actually stop working. It'll actually like crash if we take these settings up too high. So of course, we always want to save and then render our stuff out. Now we can't zoom too far back on the stuff because eventually Maya will kind of take over and just kind of blur some of the stuff together that actually is a hole. So we want to be somewhat close, but not terribly close. All right, so it rendered. It's okay. But I created this extra little scene maybe to help illustrate the point. So here is a sphere that I created, and just to fill it, and I turned the settings down really low in the approximation editor for both of these guys. Okay, just so you can see what could happen. So here's the sphere, and then here's my fillet, and you can see how garbagey it looks. Okay, and the reason it is because of how it's converting this shape of a NURBS into a polygon to render it out. So if I come into my attribute editor for that object, oops, not the attribute editor, sorry. If I go to my rendering editor's mental ray approximation editor, and I go to my surface mental ray approximation editor, and I edit it, now you see I have the settings really low. So I put this up to, let's say, 4 or 3 and 3, and then I render this again. You see we're getting closer to our original shape. If I crank this up to, let's say, 30 and 30, I'm getting much closer to the original shape. So what this is doing is basically taking this shape, and there's actually a convert, modify convert NURBS to polygons. Okay, so this is one method that it converts this shape into that shape. And by playing with these settings, common, polygon count, there we go. It's basically adding more divisions or taking more divisions away. And in some of these cases, it's actually going to do different things. Like in the sense of it being a general format, I can actually control the direction that I'm adding and taking divisions away. So I can basically take it back to this and get something that looks like that. Okay. So that's essentially what this tessellation stuff is doing. Is it's converting this NURB surface into a polygon using different methods, and these are the different methods that it's using. Okay. So for most things, I like to just stick to this thing, the pixel length high quality, and then render this. And if I decide that I need more divisions, I can add more divisions here. Oops. And you can see there's a little bit of blockiness. That's because I'm not fully zoomed. So I'm going to hit 1 to 1. And it looks like it's much smoother than it was. I could also come in here and take these down. I'll even go to crazy values. This is a 4-second render. Still a 4-second render. Okay. Oops. And you can see there's a slight difference. Maybe you can't see it in the video. There's a slight difference in those two renderings. Okay. So it really depends on your need as far as what you're getting out of it. Okay. Now you'll notice that all those settings that I did didn't affect this surface at all. This surface, because this is a trim surface, if I right click and go to trim edge, okay, this is a surface that I basically cut out, it has different settings. So that's why we have this other one, trim curve, where we can edit this and play with these settings too. And again, I turn these way down. This one doesn't have a high setting, so I just go to length, distance, angle. And then I could add more divisions this way. And it goes away. It's going away because I don't have anything set up down here. So if I put 0.1 for length, now I start to get something. And we can see if I zoom in on this, that we have some holes in here. And the reason we have holes is just because it's converting this thing and this thing into polygons, and sometimes those numbers just don't match up correctly. So I'm going to go back to my approximation editor. Let me take this length down lower. Okay, not a big difference there. Let's take the distance down, or up to 0.05 also. Getting a little bit closer. We can start adding more divisions here. 9 and 9 apparently is the highest we can go in there. Okay, and we're still not really getting anything there. Sometimes we actually have to look at this thing and see if Maya is even calculating it correctly. So if I click on a piece, go to the attribute editor, there's a surface shape, and I can pull this precision up. Grab this, pull the precision up. Grab this, pull the precision up. This is just inside the viewport of how it's looking inside here. And you can see with this thing even up, we still have a little bit of a gap here. Okay, and what that means is that Maya just didn't calculate that correctly. Even though it's just a simple bevel, it just didn't. Okay. So sometimes we have to kind of take the hit of, okay, we're going to have tiny little holes in some of these spots. Sometimes we can play with these until we get them to go away. I'll put this up to 5 just to see. Like I said before, sometimes it helps to go like crazy with one direction and then go the other direction. So that's 5, and we'll set this at 0.001. And in both cases, we're still getting the exact same holes. So I'm pretty much convinced that this just doesn't want to be a good surface. Okay, now we can try going back to this and editing the parameters of this fillet. And seeing if we can get those to match up that way. Now, this one is definitely taking longer. And we're actually a little bit closer. No, maybe not. It looked like we were, but we're not. Okay, so we just have to find that good balance of fitting this thing in. And then I also changed this approximation style to tree, which kind of branches out and fills in some of these holes better. Okay, so in this case, you know, that's what these things are doing. So jumping back to our texturing done thing, this area here is giving me a little bit of trouble. Okay, and if I zoom in, you can see there's actually like a hole there, and cranking this thing up and cranking this thing up are not going to fill in that hole. Okay, so I just have to be kind of creative in how I shoot my camera, that I don't show that hole off too much. The texture is going to hide some of it, the lighting is going to hide some of it. We just have to be aware that it's kind of there and not get like right up on it. Okay, now if this is something we actually wanted to get closer to, then we could rebuild the surface. I could delete the fillet out and then add a new surface in there and crank my tolerances up higher. But I think we're going to leave it the way it is. Okay, so my current settings for this, let me go to my approximation editor and edit it, is for my surfaces, I have this set to 0, 5, 0.25, and then this is set to tree. Okay, so length, distance, tree, 0, 5, 0.25. And this is the kind of rendering I'm getting. It takes about 37 seconds or so for this render to come out. There it is. So let's scroll this over. And if I look at the alpha, I see there's some tiny little spots in some of these areas like that. And that's about it. I don't see any other, there's a couple little ones down there. I don't see anything else. And even while I'm looking at this in colored mode, I don't really see a hole back there. Okay, it looks dark obviously, but I can fix that in post just by adding a different color background, or I could just put back here, if I went to this trim edge, okay, and if I filled this in, so create EP curve, hold down C, drag, hold down C, drag, go to trim edge, click the trim edge, shift click that, surfaces planar. See, I filled in the back of that, and then I can just assign the radio face plate texture to it. And now we'll have an actual color back there instead of black. Okay, so that might actually hide that a little bit better also, covering that up. Okay, so let's save where we're at. Oops, let me show you the other one and show you the trim one. Approximation editor, mental ray, edit, 0, 7, and then I did the length of 0.01. You may have to play with your settings to get your stuff to look good, or good enough, right? Because we can't really cover that up. Good enough. So that's where we're at with it. Okay. So now that we have this, our camera is set up, and you see that I have, remember I have the several cameras. I have camera 2 doing that. I have camera 3 doing that. I have camera render doing this. Okay. Now I can go into my render settings and set that thing up. So I'm going to go with this, and I'm going to say give us a name, Sarcona radio rendering, or console. There we go. Now if I wanted to put my camera in here, like I'm rendering more than one camera, I can't call it Sarcona console rendering because I'm going to have like 3 cameras. So I put an underscore, then I could right click and say insert camera name. And then whichever camera I'm rendering through, it'll show me that camera. So I'll do that just so you can see it. Also, our default output profile is linear. We want this to be sRGB. Okay. Yes. Leave this as if. Name.number.extension. Our end frame is 120. Our renderable camera is camera 2. Now if I want to add another one, I click on it and go down to add renderable. You only need to add one camera, but I'm just showing you you can have multiple. Okay, so I have render cam 2, 3, and then render cam. 960 by 540, good. These ones have a lot more tabs than the other one did. My quality settings in here I'm going to take up to 2. It's going to make a longer render, but it's going to make a nicer render. Under ray tracing, there we are. I want to make sure that my refractions are set to at least 4. That should be good. And my maximum trace depth, actually my reflections I'm going to take down to 2. Reflections 2, refractions 4, maximum trace depth of 6 is basically these 2 numbers added together. And that's it. Okay. So now I save, and now I render. This is a different box. One of the things we want to make sure of is that we click this auto render threads off and set this to a high number like 12 or 14 or 18 or something. So I'm setting it to 12. Right clicking, start task manager. And then inside the task manager's process tab, we should have Maya batch pop up here. There it is. So you can see how this is at 19, 6, 8, 12. This should get above 25, should get above 30. It should go all the way up to 99. If it doesn't, then we want to stop the rendering and start it all over again, okay, with some modified settings. Mine's actually getting above it, so I'm good. But pretending that it wasn't, we would right-click, end the process. It would ask us, are you sure? We hit yes. And then we would come into the render settings again, go to batch render option box, and make this number a lot higher, like 16. And then hit batch render and close, and then try it again. Most of the time, that's a good enough fix, and it'll work. If you don't do that, it'll only render with 2 cores, 2 parts of the processor, and it'll take a quarter of the time. This way, it's going to use my entire processing power and get this thing rendered much, much quicker. Okay? Alright, so now I'm in the image folder for my project. Here is frame 1. Back in Maya, it's still working on frame 1. You can see frame 1 is still chugging along on that camera. Okay, and you can see where it says camera render, whatever. It's on 40%. So once this is done, then I'll be able to look at it and see what that frame looks like. You always want to check your stuff when it comes out just to make sure that what you're rendering is what you want. Okay, if you render your stuff and it's the wrong camera, the camera's not moving, anything happens, then, you know, it's not a good thing. So we want to be able to correct it. Now once this camera's done, or once this frame is done, I can check it out just by double clicking it. I'll just double click that one just to see. There it is. Or I could right click, open with, and then say fcheck, which is what we want to open that with. Alright, so this is 65% done. It's good. Let's pretend that rendering wasn't good. We go to render and we say cancel the batch render. We fix what we need to fix, and then we go back to batch render and start that process over again of always going back and checking and checking and checking. I can close down Photoshop. I don't need Photoshop open while this is rendering. We're at 75%, 80%. While we're waiting for this, YouTube, great resource for tutorials. Here's a website or a channel called CG Tuts Plus. They have lots of tutorials for not only Maya, but Cinema 4D, 3D Studio Max, Maya. Here is an entire series on how to build a stylized car.
Okay,
So they go through modeling this vehicle in Maya. And here's how to model an iPhone in 3ds Max. Here's how to do visual effects integration, linear workflow. Okay. So we're just going to, again, let this thing chug. Oh, we're on frame 2 already. Let's go back to our images. Let's look at frame 1. And that looks pretty nice. That looks pretty sweet. Okay. Might have a little too much grain here. Maybe we want to knock that back. But that's all stuff that we can play with. Okay, so I'm obviously rendering the correct camera, otherwise I wouldn't have been that close, because none of my other cameras are that close. Frame 2, already done. Let's look at frame 2. Okay, it's not frame 2, sorry, it's camera 2, frame 1. Okay, now I can see what this is looking like here. I can see the alpha, and you see with this, with our render settings up, unless there's some smudge on my screen. No, yeah, there's smudge on the screen. Okay. I don't see any alpha issues from this camera. And then let's go back to Maya. Let's see, frame 3 is taking a little bit longer because we're further or closer to it. So we're just going to let it chug. And then we'll check out camera 3 and make sure camera 3 is good. Okay, obviously you're going to have one camera, so your one camera is just going to be the one camera. There are ways in After Effects that we can actually edit these things together. And yeah, 3's done. And that's just to help you make a better piece of work. And again, not seeing any alpha or holes in this from this angle. Okay, so like I said, sometimes just the angle of this is really going to help you get a nicer view. So you can see, boom, this is wonderfully beautiful, except for these smudges on my screen, which I keep thinking are holes, but they're not. Okay, so we let it go, and then the After Effects portion of this is exactly the same as the After Effects portion of the other one. The turn-in process is exactly the same as the turn-in process for the other one. Okay, so nothing's going to change from there. This video is already like 3 hours and 16 minutes. I'm going to cut it up though. But yeah, so you can just go back and watch that part. If you need to fix anything, you can fix anything, obviously. And the goal of this is just to get just some really cool NURBS tools under our belt so that we can do this kind of stuff, kind of freestyling it. You can do lots of cool things with this. If you wanted to like write your initials in here, you could go to the curves tool or the text tool, create your initials, project them on there, intersect it, trim it out, and you have your name cut out. Okay, lots of cool stuff that we can do. All right, so that's going to conclude this assignment. As always, make sure that we have all of our layers named correctly. Make sure in our outliner we have all of our stuff labeled correctly. I have a couple things here that I just added in at the last minute. So I'm going to delete the history and just organize these into their correct areas. And my cameras, I'll leave right there. Okay, and then in the hypershade, oops, we want to make sure that all of our stuff inside here is also labeled. And you can see I have, oops, a Mia that doesn't have a name on it, so I right click, select objects. And that's just the stick shift head. There we go. So we'll save this as, I saved it as texturing done, it doesn't matter. Rendering. There we go. So now it's ready to render. It's rendering right now. It's going. I can let it cook based on how long it's taking per frame. I can do some simple math to figure that out. You know, it takes 2 minutes a frame times 120 frames, 240 minutes, divided by 60, 4 hours. Divided by 24, 1/6 of a day. Okay, so that is your console project.